Hello, and welcome to today's program of the Commonwealth Club of California. Welcome. My name is Elizabeth Carney. I'm the chair of Regeneration with Paul Hawken. We invite our audience to visit us on the internet at commonwealthclub.org to become a member and to learn more about our programs and podcasts. In fact, during this unprecedented time, you could even hold watch parties with your friends and watch our virtual feed. I would especially like to thank our media partners, all of whom are great for adding to your punch list. We'll get to that later on. St. Mary's College, School of Economics and Business Administration, ESGX and Hip Investor, Bioneers, who will have their event in a couple of weeks, and Pachamama Alliance, who's having their annual event tomorrow with Paul. So a little housekeeping. Please post your questions in the chat on our YouTube channel, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can throughout the hour, so I'll keep an eye out for them. At the end of our conversation, we have been celebrating on this forum different artists, poets, and today a filmmaker. We'll have a special bonus clip for you at the end, so stay around. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, author and environmentalist, Paul Hawken, who's just published a new tome, Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. Paul, welcome.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. It's nice to be back.
We had fun when we were introducing the Drawdown book here.
We did.
I remember how much fun we had. And now you are back with a new book, Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. And I'm really curious about your journey. I'd like to know a little bit about what brought you to write it, especially for someone, I just feel like you've been dedicated to the earth your whole work life.
Thank you. There's several ways to look at that question with respect to the book itself. The first is that I knew I was going to write it even before I completed Drawdown. So it has a different function. Drawdown was very much about what we can do in order of impact globally. And Regeneration is about how to get it done. And there's many more solutions additional to Drawdown and other solution providers in the world besides Drawdown and besides Regeneration included in the website of the book. And so in a way, the book is a neurotransmitter that goes to the last section, which is called Action and Connection. The whole point of Regeneration is to act and connect, or maybe it's connect and act. And that points to the website, which is the most important part of the book, actually, is the website. It's not like an add-on or afterthought or pointing back to the book itself. The book is pointing to the website.
Tell us the name of the website.
Regeneration.org. And were we lucky to get that URL? I can't even tell you.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about those punch lists a little bit later on, because I think I've seen some things there that are super interesting. But before that, I thought we would think just a little bit more about, like, what was it? What have you learned? What was it like to write that book? How did you assemble your ideas? Like, tell us some stories about its making.
Sure. Well, going back to the first question, really, there's another purpose for Regeneration, the title. There's two parts to the title and the subtitle. I've been reading, and the climate literature in what I call climate speak, for a long, long time, and sort of watching it. I don't have much of a science background. I have an English background. I'm an English major. And I love language, and I appreciate language for what it does and can't do, and the power of English, or the power of language when it's used properly. And what I noticed was that the climate dialogue, or the climate reporting, or the climate jargon, if you will, or the jargonization of climate, really, was actually driving people away from engagement, activity, and involvement. And everyone can saw the same thing I see, or sees the same thing, which is that the verbs that are used are fighting and tackling and combating, and mitigating, conquering, as if climate change was the enemy, number one, and using war and sports metaphors, which are very, which gender did those come from? We can, and then, but then using them as if climate change was the problem and that it's an it somewhere that you can go fight. And so there's so many problems with the, like I say, the way we language this in the media and television and videos, in blogs, etc.
People have been left frozen.
Well, I mean, first of all, it is not an it. This is othering language. We are the women, Muslims, different races, ethnicities, sexual practices. We are in an othering era, and othering is the cause of global warming, not the solution. Because if it's other, and you can then other the ocean, you can other forms of life, you can other the land, you can other the whole world, and take whatever you want, and then the waste goes to somebody else at some other time, downstream, whatever. There is no other on this earth. It's one
It's like
system.
throwing things away.
There is no away. Exactly. And so what I want to do is just bring it back. First of all, the climate is supposed to change. It's a miracle. It's beautiful. We wouldn't have snow, ice, rivers, water, honey, hummingbirds, forests, all the beautiful things that make this earth so miraculous, were it not for climate change. The climate's supposed to change, okay? Second of all, it is not the problem, because nature never makes a mistake. Important point. Because it can't. We do. And so we have to look at the cause of warming, because it's the warming of the planet that changes climatic expression. And, without nerding out here, there's two causes. One is the jet stream, that is the movement of air in the atmosphere, and then there's oceanic currents, which is the movement of currents. And both of those are basically ruled scientifically by fluid dynamics, one of the most complex science endeavors in the world. It's so complicated. But as those change, climate changes. As climate changes, the weather changes, and so forth. So by othering it and so forth, we have basically, under the delusion that there's something that can be fought or combated or tackled. That's a wonderful one. I like tackling it. And the problem with that is then that the individual feels like, well, I can't do that. I hope they do, whoever they are. And so that's why 98% of humanity is completely disengaged from climate. They may think about it, they may be empathetic, but they don't do anything at all, virtually. And so here we have the greatest crisis civilization has ever faced, and I hope ever will. And somehow we have spent 50 years communicating in such a way that 98% of the people are not involved. That was why I used the word regeneration. I wanted to change the framing of what the solutions express and the possibilities, as opposed to dwelling again and again on the probabilities of what's going to go wrong, how fast, and how fast is it going wronger.
Well, if it's all about jet stream and ocean currents, then to make a silly joke, we should be going with the flow.
Well, as soon as we talk about that, though, most people most of the world can't think that way. They have everyday lives. They're pressed. They're stressed. They have needs that they must deal with every day. And so we've communicated with metrics and jargon and, acronyms, and this was flying back and forth, is right now is quintessentially true with the Conference of the Parties. And yet it doesn't reach people at all. That's not a way, that's not storytelling. That doesn't really give people a sense that the solutions to reversing global warming are actually inherently ones that cause great benefit for everybody in the world, virtually everybody except people who are super rich. And so what we have now is a sense that the solutions to reversing global warming take something away that are subtraction, that make life more stressful, that make us, less economically secure. And that that has been exploited by both the climate deniers, but by others in such a way to make most people afraid instead of engaged.
I've spent some time with your book. I love your book. It's so beautiful. But the other thing that I noticed is that I started really getting back into reverence. Like reverence with nature is a really different place to come from than, what is this latest storm going to do to me? And the thing that I've felt myself growing in is reverence for human beings. I mean, we're actually part of life. We're not separate from nature. We're as much part of nature. And imagine if we had reverence for ourselves and for each other. What a different way to get back into connection and communication with each other.
A wonderful story by Namante Namquino, by Hindu Ibrahim, she's a Chadian Udabi pastoralist whose mother did something very extraordinary and educated her. And she is an expert in geospatial mapping. And the pastoralists have a 1,000-kilometer route that they take on an annual basis. And she was talking about this idea of a seventh generation. That is, that they look ahead 7 generations to understand and the action they should take today. Okay, we've heard that before from the Onondaga Nation, from the Haudenosaunee people. Excuse my mispronunciation there. But what she said was something interesting. She said that we look ahead 7 generations because we know and remember and we're told exactly what happened to 7 generations prior. So we see ourselves as part of a continuity of life. And it's anathema to think that we could remove ourselves from that continuity with our culture, with our tribe, with our family, with those with whom we live and share. And so we don't have that. We have no sense of the past and apparently no sense about the future in the sense of how we're acting. And that has been, in a sense, a precious thing that indigenous people have. And it is fundamentally about reverence for now, for those who, succeed us, for those who preceded us, And if we don't look at ourselves as being ancestors, because we will be, then who are we ancestors to right now? And if our role isn't to regenerate life on Earth, because it is degenerating rapidly, I ask the question, why are we here? Really, why are you here? What are you here to do? Why did you come? And given what we know, every single living system on Earth is in decline, and the rate of decline is accelerating. Every industry in the world is extractive, whether it's a service industry or makes products. Extractive means it takes life, it harms life, it destroys life. That's degeneration. We're losing our oceans, our forests, our grasslands. We're losing our mangroves, our wetlands, our speciation, our birds, our pollinators. There's not one exception, and the rate of loss is extraordinary. And so we can see in what Hurricane Ida and extreme weather and drought and unquenchable fires that we've had here, in the Dixie Fire in Siberia, the road to degeneration, we can see the end of that road. It doesn't go much further. It's not like, well, we can do this and make net zero commitments, like cool. So really what regeneration is about is saying, can we do a 180? Like, can we imagine an economy, a world, a state, a culture, a company, a business, a city, a process that actually creates more life instead of less life? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes. So it's really a question, do we want to continue to steal the future, which is what we're doing? Or do we want to heal the future? Do we want to make a future that actually is truly prosperous, that does serve the needs of all living beings, of course, all human beings and all else we share the planet with? And that is, to me, the inflection point that we're at. And that's why, again, why the term regeneration was used as the title.
Well, and you list guiding principles of regeneration in your book. And they're the things like what you just said. Does it heal or steal the future? Does it enhance well-being or diminish it? Does it prevent disease or profit from them?
Right.
And there's 3 pages of wonderful questions like that allow us to look through the lens of your solutions and in your book in a completely different way.
They really do. I mean, regeneration is a lens. It's a framing. It's a way of seeing the world very differently. Just to be sure that one doesn't think that it's out there somewhere. All 30 trillion cells in your body are regenerating every nanosecond, or you wouldn't be having this conversation. So we are walking, talking, regenerative, organisms, okay? And we depend on it. Well, all of life is. All of life is. It's the default mode of life. So when you stop degenerating, and there's examples in the book in terms of wilding and marine protected areas and so forth, the rate at which the natural world regenerates is extraordinary. It's extraordinarily quick, much quicker than scientists had thought or expected or predicted. And so really what we're talking about is, can we actually get in alignment with biology? I mean, that is life, the study of life, as opposed to fighting it tooth and nail every step of the way. And because it's not going to work, it doesn't have a future, and we have a world of great suffering now. That suffering is only going to increase if we turn a blind eye to it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that about how quickly nature regenerates, because at the very beginning of COVID, when San Francisco was just starting to become different and shut down a little bit, I met a whale at Crissy Field.
Yeah.
I've lived here 20 years and I never met a whale there
Right.
before. I figured she was, out eating some sardines and munching. But I felt like I got a communication from her that was like, if you humans will just do a little bit yourselves, nature will
Yeah.
regenerate.
Yeah, I mean, you had kangaroos going down the main street in Adelaide, I mean, you had all sorts of reindeer and other animals, bears, all over the world showing up like, hey, you guys are chill, so let me, it's quiet, I feel safe, and I'm going to go walk down your main street. And we had, at my house in Mill Valley, I mean, we had fox. And one night, my wife and I were watching something, a documentary on Netflix or something, and the living room was dark, and then we went in, turned the light on, and then fox were actually sleeping on the couch, in the chair by the couch, and so forth. And they looked up, going, they kind of looked at us like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Like, not us saying, "What are you doing?" And they sort of went out, like looking back at us, as if like, "Okay, well," but. Really, I felt during that time, too, the animals felt safer and they could come out. And even where we were, and all over the world, that's true, because we slowed down.
We slowed down, didn't we?
Calmed down, yeah.
And when we slow down, it gives us the opportunity to listen.
Well, there's an essay in there called by Isabella Tree. She wrote a book called Wilding. It's a beautiful essay by this about her husband Charlie Burrell, and she inherited this farm in Sussex in England, unbeknownst to them. They knew they were going to inherit it, but not so soon. It skipped a generation. And they said it was losing money, and so they did everything they could to invest in agriculture machinery, this and more fencing, and inputs, and it lost more and more money. And so finally, they met an ecologist from the Netherlands called Frans Vera, and he suggested bringing back the animals that used to be in Europe and the UK. The horses and the pigs and the oryx with the longhorn cattle, and to just ring fence it, which they did, take out all the interior fencing, and then just let it go and watch and see what happened. And in 20 years since they did that, they have more red listed species than every conservation area in the UK put together. And they have the first pair of nesting storks in the UK in 600 years. They did this in 20 years. And now they have safaris, people line up and pay to go and look at the wildlife in the butterflies. They have butterfly tours, they have this tours. And that's 20 years on farmland. And so it happened all by itself. The pigs made lakes, there's mussels there now. Where'd the mussels come from? They dive for the mussels, It's just astonishing, the complex relationships and associations in living systems. This intelligence, it's an innate intelligence, that is, we keep interrupting and disrupting and crushing and killing and poisoning and burning and scraping, and when you stop doing that, it's
if we slow down and listen, then we can hear that innate intelligence instead of being so dominant.
Well, some people say, what's the one thing I should do? And, sometimes I don't want to answer that question. I don't know what you should do. But then I say, from my point of view, the most important thing you can do is find out where you live. You don't know where you live. We're on unceded territory of the Miwok, coastal Miwok, right here. Mm-hmm. And how many people in San Francisco know that? They don't know what the Miwok did. And it's like, and where they were, and their culture, their traditions, and they sustained this, and with the Ohlone and others, this whole larger ecosystem from the valleys up Sacramento, San Joaquin, the coastal areas for thousands and thousands and thousands of years in such a beautiful way that when people came here from Europe and they went into the valley, they thought it was like Hyde Park. It was so beautiful, so well groomed. It was them, the way they interacted with their environment, and so. But do people know the migratory birds, or which ones are not? Do they know what are the natural plants? That is the native plants. Do they know what the invasive ones? Do they know what lives here? What lives under the soil? Do they? We don't know where we live anymore.
So we can bring our curiosity.
Well, yeah. So you think nature is just sort of an abstraction. You can see a Richard Attenborough thing on BBC, and say, wow. But that is with he is a hero as a person, but the photography is like eco-pornography, which is you look at that and go, I'll never see that my whole life. And so it also removes people from nature in a certain way. It makes you feel like it's just stunning, for sure, and awesome. But we have to fall in love with the nature that is ours here, the bay, the wetlands, and the forest.
I like to say that we're at the southern end of Salmon Nation.
Right, that's one way.
Which means like there's this whole thing that used to happen here all the way up through Vancouver and beyond. And all through the Columbia Plateau and the Columbia River. And the salmon were so thick that you could walk on top of them. There were so many in that river.
Well, my great-great-grandfather wrote letters, and he said when you looked at Richardson Bay, which is that bay off Sausalito to Tiburon, in the winter, you could not see the water. It looked like you could walk right across it. It was so full of birds.
Wow.
So we don't know what we've lost, because
but we can start to make new pictures for ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that I love so much about your book is that it is all about the systems. So with those traditional indigenous cultures that were salmon people, they understood that when that bear took a salmon out of the river and he took his he chomped it and he took his salmon sandwich and then he flung the rest of the salmon over on the side and the other little four-leggeds ate it, and then it fertilized the redwood trees. It fertilized the plants as well as the animals. So you start to see the connectedness, the interconnectedness of all life.
Yeah, but I don't want viewers to think that regeneration is just about the untouched natural world. It's about cities.
Oh,
yeah. It's about
Okay.
industry.
So
It's
tell us
about
a little
energy.
bit about your pictures.
No, I mean, it's about the whole...
Tell us about the 15-minute city.
Well, that's Mayor Hidalgo in Paris is probably the vanguard of doing this. It's happening all over Barcelona and other cities, but where the city is designed in such a way that everything you need is within a 15-minute walk, or in some cases, if you have a bike. And so you don't need a car. And in other words, rather than changing, okay, get an EV, okay, great, but it's still a car, it's still a road, it's still traffic. Mm-hmm. And to really reimagine what the city is. And she now has committed, I think, 219 million euro to, I would call it bike proofing, but basically making Paris the quintessential biking city. And not just green lanes, but also safe ones, places to park, places to get your bikes, actually fixed and maintained and so forth. And they've also created the Eau de Paris, which is basically the water of Paris. And so everywhere in Paris, you can get absolutely the best water in your water bottle, in just, there it is, free. And so getting rid of plastic you get rid of plastic by supplying the need, not by saying, don't use plastic. Fair enough. But then what are people going to do when they need water, and so forth? I mean, not everybody carries a water bottle, but there everybody has an incentive to do so because the French people are very much into quality water. I mean, they serve it, and at lunch and dinner. And so, again, so it's the reimagination of the city, and then you also see the nature cities where people are putting in microforests and greening buildings, literally. I mean, not like just energy use, but it's plants, You see the Bosco Verticale that Stefano Boeri did in Milano, where basically it's a vertical forest. He was the first to do it. It's being done all over the world now, especially, of all places, China. I mean, and so you're imagining, instead of some trees in a city in a forest. In other words, it's a figure ground shift. Mm. And what that does to noise, to air quality, that it gives rid of noise, to air quality, to pollinators, birds, wonder, nature, what it does to children, what it does to neighborhoodliness, that is to say, the happiness and the joy and the sense of community that can arise from that, instead of one that's all concrete and cars going back and forth all day long, and you have to close your window and put in air conditioning, and it's like it's a very different place to live, and so that's part of regeneration too, just as important, because there's 7.8 billion of us, and most of us live in cities, so we're not just talking about the regeneration of forests and grasslands and farmlands and degraded land. We're talking about the oceans as well. We're talking about the regeneration of habitat, where people live, our habitats, not just the habitat of creatures.
Well, and it seems to me like there's some synergies there that we don't even think about. I mean, like human beings breathe out carbon dioxide and the plants breathe it in. So there's like these unseen synergies that we don't even think about. But when you say that about a city that's more forest than city, I feel like, oh, finally we can breathe.
Yeah, and I want to move there. It's like, I want to live there, It's like, where would you want to be? Everybody wants to be in that place. They don't want to be in a concrete jungle, and regardless of income level. And so, and also to make that happen with fairness and justice and equity. So it's not just, the rich neighborhoods with the big lawns, and they get all the trees, which is what's happened in virtually every city in America. And it's like, no, that doesn't work. And so this idea of justice and fairness equity is so important to reversing global warming, because if we don't, then we still have the mindset that it's something other that we fix as the privileged people, which we are, know it for sure, but we're going to fix it, for who and how? And if we aren't creating a means and a way and a sense of engagement and inclusion for the 3 billion people who live in impoverished conditions, then we'll fail. We'll fail. If we stop talking about future existential threat, please stop talking about it. That's scientifically true. It goes right by everybody. The brain doesn't care about future existential threat. We're not wired that way. We're wired to current existential threat. And most of the world wakes up every morning concerned about that day's existential threat, whether it's money, education, food, security, health. That's what people wake up with. So the interesting thing, again, going back to the website of the book, regeneration.org, if you look at those solutions, and it's the world's most complete listing of climate solutions and how to get them done. If you took away climatology altogether, it's like a science, we never thought of it before, we didn't do it. Okay, we don't have a single climate scientist. If you took away, any implication that extreme weather was caused by anything other than just whatever, it's a random, event, it's not amplified by warming. You take both those off the table, and you look at those solutions, we would want to do every single one of those solutions on their own merit, because they have cascading benefits for people everywhere, and particularly for people who live in impoverished conditions. There's no such thing as a poor person. There's a human being who lives in impoverished conditions. And what I say in the book, if you want to know the cause of poverty, go look who's benefiting. Then you'll know the cause. And so we have an opportunity here to actually come together in a way, because the possibilities that are inherent in regeneration address so many other issues, challenges, problems that we separate in different silos as if they were disconnected, and they're not disconnected.
But I imagine, like in the city that you just described, where things are close by and we get out of our cars, we can start to have a sense of being connected to each other again and having communities. And my feeling in research is that the more we have strong communities, the more we can hold all the edges.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've individuated, advertisers and social media too have doubled down on that, but we have made every person so acutely believing that they're an individual. And they're not. There's no such thing as an individual. We are part of complex networks just like everything else in nature. And you take away that complex network of our friends, our family, our neighborhood, our community, our city, our clubs, our companies, our classes, our colleges, I can go on, our churches, our mosques, our temples, whatever. I mean, you take all that away, and basically you're one lonely person and you'll die soon, because it's not that you can't live in the wild by yourself, you can, but our life depends on this interconnection we have. Mm-hmm. And so, we see ourselves, in that way, and we act that way, and we act it out, and as the world becomes more challenging and stressful, then we double down on our individuality. We're going to take care of myself first, And so whether it's like making more money or, buying a gun or moving someplace, and all, we're acting out the wrong scenario, which is that all of life is a community. Soil is a community. All health comes from the soil. You treat soil like dirt, and there goes your health system. Animal health, human health. So, so there is an offering here. It's not as though it's like it's a curse and we have to deal with it. Oh my God, I got born at the wrong time. Really, the way I see it is that we're being homeschooled by Mom, by Mother Earth. Okay, she's homeschooling us, and which is thank you. And she's been trying to do it for a long time, and we're not really listening, to the lesson plan. But lesson plan always, number one, is really being in alignment with biology. And again, it goes back to the fact that nature never makes a mistake. So what are we doing that's out of alignment? And can we do something that's in alignment that actually meets human needs on all levels, whether it's emotionally, culturally, nutritionally, health, education, connection, art, music. I mean, all these things are human needs or human expressions or what it means to be humanity. And so regeneration is the core of that because it really has got big arms. And when you start to say, well, I'm going to fight climate change, people go, show me. I mean, it's like that doesn't have big arms. I mean, even if you're into sports, that isn't very attractive. And so that's why regeneration, the title. And ending the climate crisis in one generation means that by 2030, we will have started to move at such a rate in such a way that we can see our way through the crisis. It doesn't end our work. It actually expands and grows and burgeons more and more by 2030. But it's not as though it's going to be, okay, we got that fixed. It's not a fix. It's not a fix.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you think it's a fix, it's an it. That's what Bill Gates says. It. I said, Bill, what's it? Tell me what it is,
And I think that the more we learn that interconnectedness, the more we'll be able to feel the shift.
Well, recognize it. It's just we're surrounded by it. In a sense, we have duped ourselves because we are so beautifully, intricately interconnected. I mean, everything that we see, whether it's inside our body, which we can't see but understand our bodies, but outside, is just extraordinary. And one of the things that we talk about in regeneration is indigeneity, that is the indigenous cultures, and there's 5,000 of them.
And maybe they've been listening a little bit better than some of the rest of us.
Well, much more than that. They weren't listening. They were observational scientists. There's 5,000 cultures. They have 4 to 5% of the land in the world that's under their control or was their tribal land, and 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is on that land. That's not a coincidence. That's a practice. That's a culture. That's an understanding. And what indigenous people did by pragmatism, they had to, which is to know where they live. And that came from observation. That's observational science, which is different than empirical science. Empirical science, you do an experiment. If you can't repeat it, then it's not a truth. In other words, you have to repeat it, right? It's repeatable. Nature never repeats itself. Right. So that's a whole different type of science. Darwin was an observational science, by the way, so it's in our culture as well. But so observational science is really pattern recognition and looking at the relationships, they're complex, and then creating ways to grow that understanding and pass on that understanding to succeeding generations. And they did that through rituals, through song, through celebration, through stories, through narratives. And that is how they passed it on. And we think that the indigenous people were illiterate. They didn't have a written language, so therefore they could never be as smart as we were with all our writing. And what we don't understand is that they had memories that are extraordinary. They had a hippocampus, part of the brain, that could store incredible amounts of information. I mean, there's 700 stories that the Dene people, the Navajo, have about 700 different insects. Get out of here. Who even can identify 700 different insects? We have the Micmac in Nova Scotia who could walk by, a mother tree, which we're going to see when this is over, and we'll see a short clip about the mother tree in Suzanne Simard. They walk by these sort of main trees in the forest, and they would listen to the wind soughing through the branches. And the sound that they heard became the name of the tree. there was a specific name for that tree. They could go by that tree 5, 10 years later, and they remembered the name. They listened to the sound, and they could tell whether the tree was healthy or something had happened to it. Now, what do you call that? It's unimaginable intelligence and understanding. And talk about observational science. Just by the name and the name and the sound, you can make the correlation. Again, pattern recognition. I can tell so many stories like this. And this is the treasure that, Cortez and all these, El Dorado, all these things came to get the gold and silver. They missed the treasure, which is this exquisite understanding of place. And if we don't recapture that understanding of our place and our relationship to it, we won't be here. The earth is going to regenerate. There's no question. It's either going to do it with us or without us.
But we
no
have
question.
curiosity. Each of us has curiosity to investigate those parts of our ingenuity that speak to us and that...
Well, I hope each of us does. I don't think each of us does. I think each of us could. And it's there, like just this amazing world, and understanding of the world into relationship to it. Regeneration offers that as well, So again, it's like I said, we are innately regenerative. Anything we do when we care about our mate, we care about our children, we care about our neighbors, we care about our friends, we care when we go to church or the mosque or the temple and so forth, and we pray. What are we praying for? I mean, it is about care for the future, care for others, care for those around us there, care for those who are not as well cared for, the dispossessed and the poor and those who are suffering and so forth. We care a lot. Caring is regeneration. That is the expression of regeneration. So that's, again, why the title is there, because it's innate to who we are as opposed to being an add-on,
And so I've been making a little list for myself of okay, well, what should go on my punch list, right?
Explain what a punch list is.
So in the book, there's this idea that each of us, either personally or if we're small business people in our small business, but we can each start to think about, okay, well, here I am, here's what makes me curious or makes me want to engage. And so the first thing that was on mine was investigate my last 7 generations. I don't even know who, I can go back to my grandfather or my great-grandfather, but can I really go back beyond? So I put that one on the list. I put investigating this network of trees idea, the whole idea that they all connect with each other.
So learning, that's you're learning about the past, and you're learning about basically the trees actually are a community that communicate to each other.
And that maybe that gesture of communications is really different than the Darwinian survival of the fittest. Maybe there's another model that has to do with helping each other and being a community and passing resources back and forth instead. What a different community we would have if that were the mentality that we had the same way that the trees do.
Yeah. Well, the punch list came from reading Otto Gawande's book, Checklist. And he was a surgeon, is a surgeon, and he noticed how airplane pilots and co-pilots, when they're flying, these big jumbo jets, they have 2 clipboards, and they check every single aspect of that plane in terms of, you've seen the dials on one, a plane, the dashboard of a plane. It's just mind-bending and so forth. They're checking every single aspect of that plane's readiness to fly. And then they switch, and they do it again. They do it a second time. And then, and only then, are they ready to fly the plane, okay? So what Gawande discovered was that in the hospitals where he was, and other hospitals, the rate of malpractice and mistakes that happen in surgery were avoidable. because those were mistakes. And afterwards, in hospitals, they do get together and say, oh, God, you took out the wrong kidney. How'd that happen? I mean, there's a reason. Well, there was a mistake made, obviously.
But also some observational science maybe
No,
going
it's
along
not
that.
observational science. It's just observation.
Yeah.
It's just like you screwed up. That's not science. That's like, I won't say it online. But I mean, and so, no, it's like, and then he said, well, what a surgeon should have is a checklist. And a lot of surgeons really resisted that because, they're the king of this, medical world, brain surgeon. And they resisted it, but the hospitals then insisted upon it, and they implemented it, and then malpractice and surgical mistakes dropped by 75%. So
How much?
75%.
Wow.
Okay, just from having a checklist. So what I did in regeneration is create punch lists, which is, when you actually make a list of things that you're going to do, you're much more likely to do them, whether this week or this month or this year. I have a punch list up there too. And one of the things I want to do is remove fossil fuels completely from my house. And so I have a little scar here from putting in the heat pump. But I'm getting rid of natural gas for water, for heating, and for cooking. And I can't wait to call PG&E and say, would you come get your gas meter? It's on my property and I don't need it. Thank you so much. And not only that, I use less energy because heat pumps use much less energy per BTU of warm than natural gas. And so I reduce my energy input, and all the energy is coming from Marin Clean Energy, so it's all renewable. So, that's one of the 8 or 9 things on my punch list. Everybody is different. And the reason I wanted to do the punch list for people to share is the idea that somehow this is what you should do. I was brought up Catholic and I was an altar boy, and this is what you should do, or you screwed up, or it's a venial sin, it's an ordinary sin, it's a mortal sin, like guilt. Get rid of that and really use your imagination as to what it is, that's going to actually be regenerative, And there's a lad that goes to camps, these settlement camps, these refugee camps, the big, huge ones like the Rohingya camp in Bangladesh, and he teaches children art. He makes these big murals and puts them out in paint. They're not being taught anything at all, And this is now they're going to paint, and they're painting their trauma as well, expressing themselves. And that's regeneration too. And so it's really important that we see it in this really broad and encompassing sense, as opposed to, my, childhood Catholic sense of like, you better do this or we're screwed, which is a lot of the rhetoric around climate, And I'm not saying that the science isn't right there. If we don't get things done, we are screwed. but it just isn't an inviting narrative, to people. And so I wanted to open it up so people could see how each other are responding. And again, it's not just you as an individual, it's you as a family, you as your network, you as your company, you as your neighborhood. It can be any you that you want to describe, usually first person or plural.
But also, as people stop and ask you, well, Paul, what do you think I should do? Then to turn that back and give the mirror so I can write down what it is that I'm
get ideas from other
attracted to.
people's lists too. Yeah, like I say, they're imaginative and they're wonderful, and because people are imaginative and they are wonderful, and so why not bathe in that and celebrate that and instead.
In a conversation that I listened to you having with Mark Hyman, who's a functional medicine doctor, a guy who's into root causes of our chronic diseases, I know that the best ways to change our lifestyle is to do it in groups. Like even if you have 7 or 8 people to egg each other on, it's so much better than that January, make a resolution, and in 5 minutes you already forgot that you promised to run around the neighborhood every day.
Yeah.
So having it in groups. And so I'm wondering, maybe we could have some of this list making, punch lists, in groups where we could egg each other on.
Well, we might have foreseen what you just said. We have something that's not complete yet called Climate Action Systems. And it is for a group to form and learn together. about a specific solution or activity or challenge. For example, there are challenges like acidification of the ocean, loss of coral reefs, the loss of the boreal forest, the biggest stock of carbon in the world on terrestrial systems. Those are challenges. Obviously we want to solve them and protect them and change them, but I wouldn't call them solutions so much as challenges and so forth. But anyway, the point being, climate action systems is a way for people to connect in and learn together. Because we are Homo sapiens. That's why we're here, not Neanderthals, because we like to learn together, work together, solve problems together. I mean, that's who we are naturally. And so, to your point, exactly. And that's what Climate Action Systems is coming. The website is a work in progress. We had a lot of ideas about what we wanted to do, but we're understaffed and over enthusiastic, and so those things are coming, and that'll be there in maybe a month or two.
But anybody could form a
Yeah,
little
absolutely.
group, to like a reading group or a
Right.
egging each other on group.
The thing about the Climate Action System, which is different, which is a learning module, which can be disseminated. That is, you can pass it on. You can, you're in Boston, and where you can send it to somebody in Belgium, so you can send it to somebody in Ojai. In other words, you can learn from others learning and so forth. And you can see this is applicable to Austin, Texas, but this one's not applicable. And then, so you're actually creating learning pods that self-replicate. And the imitation there, what we're trying to do is imitate natural systems, which is their self-organizing systems, So we're trying to create in the website and what we do the conditions for self-organization. We're not trying to organize. We're not trying to tell people what to do. We're not trying to, not at all. It doesn't work anyway. We're trying to create the conditions in which people can imagine, create, connect, and act. And that's the only way, really, I mean, with all due respect to the Conference of the Parties, that we're going to reverse global warming, because that engages the bulk of humanity.
I'm getting a lot of pressure from all of the interested parties online who are sending in questions.
Let's go.
And so one of them is Lynn Twist.
Yeah.
And she says, congratulations on your new book. Regeneration is clearly the way forward. It is time to put life at the center of every decision. Bravo, Paul and team. Then there's this whole batch of questions that have to do with communication. I got one from Brazil, and he was asking, reflecting on the first book and getting the feedback that you did, what have you learned about communicating around this idea? And another person who's asking about communications is saying,